Rory Barish, welcome to the Forward One podcast.
Thank you.
Grateful to have you here, Rory. You're a dynamo, and we're excited to learn from you today. So
thank you. It's great to be here.
Love it.
And we've been in business for more than 20 years, and you've been in business.
Going on 40 this year.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And Rory is one of the few, we interview a lot of realtors, and I'll say it again, she's one of the few realtors that if I had to pick somebody to sell my house, I would go with Rory and not think twice, knowing that it was getting the absolute care, client care, and then also positioning the property in the best way possible. And we're actually working on a deal together, and
that's true.
Amazing client care.
So Rory, per Paul's point, and I know that as well because I know you well, what's your perspective when you work with a client? Like, what distinguishes you? Where's your focus with respect to the relationship?
Well, it's funny. What people have always said about me is don't tell Rory what you want unless you're ready to get it at that moment, because I'm going to find it at that moment for you. I can read someone really well, and I can read just even from how they dress, I know what they're going to like. I like to go inside their house, but I don't have to do that all the time to see how they live. But usually I'm spot on about that. So that creates a real great relationship because I get to know them really well that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so dig deeper for a moment on how you get to know them more. What specifically are you doing to really understand what's of value to them? Well,
what I say is I learn about their lifestyles and not just like a lot of people pinpoint real estate. I want to know what they like to do, what they like to do on weekends, what they like to do. Do they have kids? Don't they have kids? What their interests are. And then if they're not clear on what area they want to be in, I can kind of find that for them because I know what would fit that profile. So the more I get to learn about them, the more I know exactly where they should live if they don't even know. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I do. That's the process. And then we go around together and we drive different areas. And I always say to them, where do you feel after spending time in this area, this area, this area? Close your eyes. You have the key to the front door. Where do you see that being? Where do you see yourself walking in and just kicking off your shoes and relaxing? Is it this neighborhood? Is it that? Is it this house? And they usually can answer me pretty quickly.
Wow.
On that one. Yeah.
I love that.
It is amazing to me that if you think about the time and money, the amount of time that you're going to spend in a house, how significant a purchase that is. People will often spend more time evaluating a car purchase.
Yeah, that's true.
Worrying about the car purchase price. And, when you get down to it, the payment's a few dollars more or less a month. And you're never going to have the car more than a certain number of years. And people spend, how many, they go to an open house and they go back with a family and make sure they like it. Maybe they spend a total of like 5 hours in the house before you're really going to say, this is going to be our forever place. So,
right.
So you really try and get into the what it is and what their lifestyle and everything is going to be prior to.
Absolutely. And then I'll go back on weekends with them. I'll go back at night because it has a whole different vibe at those times,
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes somebody can love it in the day and they go back at night and they say, I'm not so sure about the neighborhood, or I'm not so sure about this or that or whatever. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
What areas do you feel that like the back of your hand? And I know the answer to some of those, right? Obviously the South Bay, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa, but also you had a long career on the west side of LA. So there's lots and lots of neighborhoods.
I started near Laurel Canyon. Mm-hmm. So it was Laurel Canyon, it was Nichols Canyon, it was Los Feliz, and like the back of my hand. And then I started to move more towards the west side in the 90s. And I went to Beverly Hills, and then it was the Palisades. And then I did a lot in Malibu even. And then as of, oh my God, how many years ago I started to do Manhattan Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Since like
and that
2009.
was a product of moving there? I'm curious, like what?
So I have a residence there as well as in West Hollywood. So when I went down there, I thought, oh my God, the real estate is fabulous here. I love it. And I know so many people down there, and I thought it was just so natural to just move into that area too. Yeah.
Yep.
How do you, and you have to understand that the sort of the glossing over, in essence, the depth that Rory knows these areas, that, it's like, oh, I know it like the back of my hand. It's the reason why when I had clients that were very important to me and they wanted a house in the South Bay, it's the reason why we called Rory. And, just like one example is, it's still not going to make sense to anybody, but you get the sense of it. You've got these walk streets. And if you're on 21st Street versus 21st Place, the orientation of the house on 21st Place, it means your whole house is oriented toward the alley, versus 21st Street, your whole house is oriented toward the walk streets, which are really cool. I mean, and it's basically you're next door. Houses are next door to each other. And just having that level of detail and knowing, a client can immediately sense that. So when you go to a new area, how do you gain that level of expertise? Is it just time on task over time, or are you doing something to learn
more specifically, intentionally? Yep.
No, I have to learn an area of really, really well to go back and to know the difference between one side of the street versus the other side of the street. And that's the thing. Not a lot. I don't want to say that, but there are a lot of agents, maybe I am going to say a lot.
Sure.
That are greedy. So when I say greedy, it's because let's just say I have a client that wants to go down to Encinitas. So wants to go, why are you sharing it with somebody, Rory? Do it yourself. It's like, what are you, nuts? Why would I do that? I don't know the area. So the house may look great, but I don't know what the area is like. And even from one side of the street to the other, or one house to the other, how do I know? So I'm going to split it with somebody, or I'm going to refer it. But if it's close enough, like Malibu is a great example. Malibu, if I have a buyer, I know it so well. But if I have a listing there, I'm going to have to service it. And it's not easy. And if someone calls up and says, I want to see it in 15 minutes or a half an hour, I can't get there. So I'm going to split it with someone on the listing side because I'm not greedy. I would rather service the client and do what's best for them. But I know the areas really well by driving it, going up and down the streets, going to open houses, speaking to the other agents there. And that's how I learn it.
And you're just super intentional about that. When you know you want to focus on an area, that's
what I do.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you want to become that area expert.
Right.
And when you're not, and you have an opportunity there, you're going to make sure you align with another agent that
100%.
Yeah. Because 100%. It's always about serving the client.
There was an exception. And I'm going to say this years ago, and we're talking in the 90s, Stan Herman, love Stan Herman. Stan Herman was a great broker. And I had a celebrity client who wanted to go to Montecito. And Stan had a place in Montecito. It hadn't taken off then. Nobody knew Montecito. So he said, I know Montecito so well. I said, look, I'm going to have to split it with someone. No, you're not going to split it with someone. I said, what are you talking about? I know it so well. I said, okay. He said, but here's what you're going to do. You're going to show him these 6 houses in this order. And I'm telling you, he's going to pick this one. Okay. But you have to go up there. And I don't want you getting lost with him because we didn't have cell phones and Google Maps and everything. I want you to go up there this weekend. If it takes 10 weekends, I don't care how, before. Learn every street. You cannot even make a bad turn on a street. You have to know where it is. You have to know where the restaurants are and everything. So I learned that area really well. Took the client up, so nervous that day. And son of a gun, it was the 3rd house. He said he's going to pick this house. That was the 3rd house and I sold it to him. And I came back and of course, I never did that again. I never, it was like, I always worked with agents. But because he knew it so well, I never would have done that. But
you had a plan.
But I had prepared. A plan and I went up there and it wasn't like, I've seen agents just like do it like, cold and drive around and get lost with the client. Oh my God, I would never, ever do that. Could never do that.
To go back a little bit, I know you did some cool stuff before, and let's just hit on that a little bit because I know you were a model, you were running around, we can cut this out, after if she forces me to, running around, Europe with Mick Jagger, for a minute. And am I allowed to say that? So I've had a big
a big life up until now. Starting out in New York City and then modeling and acting and then coming out here and being part of the entertainment business, which is how I kind of segued into real estate because, I knew all of these people and stuff. And I had a very big Studio 54 life, can I say? Yeah.
Nice.
Also a prolific swimmer,
Yeah. Yeah, I had really bad scoliosis as a child and then, as an adolescent. And then I had surgery. And the only thing that the doctors said that I really could do was swim. So I got into swimming and then I got into competing and I'm still competing in open water swimming after all of these years, which I absolutely love. Yeah.
Do you use that at all? Obviously that's great for you mentally and for work balance and all that sort of thing. Do you use that at all for business? Are you networking with the swimmers? Are you selling to the swimmers?
Oh yeah. I actually sold, you'll see on my testimonials on my website, Lenny Kraselberg, 4-time gold medal Olympian. Yeah. I sold his house and I work with Olympian swimmer. Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
That's cool. Yeah.
One of the things that from the outside, people look at the career that you had before and say, okay, well, of course she has a luxury real estate career now because da-da-da-da-da. And, we have interviewed people that have crushed it in entertainment and then they switch to real estate and, everybody's, every major exec is taking their call. They shift to real estate and suddenly it's like, oh, wow, you're a realtor now. Good luck, And so how are you able to, people think that's such a huge edge. And meanwhile, we interviewed somebody that was like, well, actually, I was devastated because none of my friends, were buying anything from me because she was a phenomenal producer and they knew she could produce a television show. But what does she know about real estate?
Right.
So how do you take that great and cool career in something else and turn it into a real estate career?
Well, how it started in Rexall Drugs with me because, and I'll say who it was, Liz Segal, one of the Segal twins, right? They had a show Double Trouble at the time, but I was very friendly with her and ran into her in Rexall Drugs and I had just gotten my license. And so I'm segueing, right? And she said, I said, what's happening with you? Blah, blah, I'm buying a house. I said, you're buying a house? She says, yeah. I said, I didn't know that when we last spoke about it. And I said, I'd love to sell to you. She says, what? I said, I got my license. She said, great. Can we see things? I said, sure. So we go out, we looked at things. And then I think it was like the third thing that we saw, third property we saw. She said, I want this. Could you write an offer? I went, yes, great. I go back to the office and went, help, I don't know what I'm doing. Because, you just get the license. It's like, okay, but you had to practice. So everybody helped me do it, whatever. And the transaction was so wonderful working with a friend. And she said, it was great working with you. I felt comfortable because you were my friend and you know me and you weren't going to sell me anything. It's like, I could trust you,
yep.
Right? That wasn't right for me. So therefore, I want to refer you to 2 friends of mine, George Clooney and Kelly Preston. And then the rest was history because it just snowballed. And it was that they trusted me. And I understand some people don't want to work with friends, but the people that I know wanted to work with me because they knew that I wasn't going to take them for a ride or sell them something that just for the commission
And I'm going to say this, knowing you, I think there's a sense of confidence that you have in yourself to know that you care, know that you're capable, know that you may not have all the answers, but that you're going to be resourceful and get the answer. And I think you exuded that confidence right when you talk to her about that. I know that in you.
Right.
And I think that's where some people you find what you're looking for. If you're looking for the solution, which I know is how you operate, versus if you're looking for what you don't know or what the problem is, then all of a sudden you don't have confidence in yourself and you're certainly not going to instill confidence into them. So I think that's a big, differentiator in certain people that are able to make a transition effectively when real estate is new because they know they're resourceful. Even though they don't have all the answers, they'll get the answers. And that confidence instills confidence in their clients.
And one of the things to turn that really into like a usable piece of advice for our listeners, one of the things that we work on, like with our business coach, even when we're just talking about business, we're talking about different things. The business coach will always say, don't tell me what you don't want. So we're like, oh, this isn't working. And, and we think this is productive. And he's like, I don't want to hear what you don't want. Tell me what you do want. And that same rule, in essence, goes into the don't tell me what you don't know. Tell me what you do know. And when people are brand new in the business, they think that the world of what they don't know is so massive, which is true. However, another thing that I always ask people is what are your superpowers? And I know that prior to real estate, I'll let you answer it. So prior to real estate, what are your superpowers as you can relate it to real estate?
That's interesting because it's like such a big, like so many things are going through my head.
I can even give you a hint because I know you so well.
And I was going to say, don't overthink it because exactly. Go ahead, Paul.
You said it already. You have amazing style. You have amazing connection with people. You don't learn that in real estate. You have amazing taste in what looks good and what doesn't look good. You don't learn that in real estate. You may know zero about the contract when on your first day. You know nothing about the contract, but you know fashion, style, lifestyle.
It's true. Yeah, I know all that. It's also being authentic. And that's what was coming to mind because that's who I am. And I don't try to put on some airs for like some people do and try to pretend I'm somebody I'm not. I just, it's what I project is who I am. But a very important thing to go back to that we said a couple of minutes ago, when I was interviewed for Elle magazine, one of the questions they asked me is, what happens when you don't know the answer to a question? And I said, I never bluff it. I never lie to a client or pretend that blah, 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 blah. I tell them I don't know and I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you with the answer. It's funny. We were talking about when I went back to the office, I was like, help. But I would never say to Liz, I would never give her the wrong answer or bluff it. And do you know something? So many people called me after that article and there were so many questions and answers. That's the one thing they loved about it. Is that I was honest. If I don't know something, I say I don't know something because you can't know everything. Even now, I'm still learning. It's crazy, but after 40 years, something can still come up in a deal that I've never dealt with before. And I'm like, that's interesting. And you have to learn.
And I know you, again, that authenticity also instills confidence because you don't have to like pretend in anything. And you're not afraid to ask the question, to have the difficult conversation. I know you well enough and just be a straight shooter. Right. And that, again, instills confidence in yourself and then, of course, in other people. And I think that's a big piece in addition to what Paul said about all the other like skills and knowledge that you have.
There are mistakes that I make. If I'm new in the business, I understand that I don't know lots and lots of stuff. And one of the things that Rory just reminded me about is, she's still learning, right? So some of the mistakes that I can make is I've been at it so long that I actually think I know a little bit more than I do in some areas, So a perfect example of that with Rory is that we're doing a deal for our client with a developer and the developer already bought the land. So you just assume they've built 400 houses. They're not going to like make some crazy error on, how many square feet can you have? And they tell me they've got plans which haven't been submitted yet. So they haven't been approved, but they were getting into this deal now without submitted and approved plans. And it says you can build a 4,200 square foot house. And my mind goes to these guys have built 400 houses. They already spent a fortune on the land themselves. I just, without even thinking about it, I know that they know how many square feet they can build the house. And Rory, who's every bit as seasoned, more seasoned, went down to the city and just said, hey, here's the lot. How much can we build? And like, there's just like, I'm not even thinking to do that. It just seems like, but when you're inside of a purchase that's so large, it makes sense to double check some stuff. It's those things that are like super obvious and you've been at it for so long that I could overlook. And Rory is just like, oh, okay, well, city's right there. It's not LA, thankfully you don't have to wait 9 hours, but you go down and you ask the people, you say, here's the plan, is this correct? It's very, very, very useful.
That's initiative. That's another, I would argue, superpower of Rory's.
For sure.
Or you take initiative. You're not waiting for someone else to make it happen. You're going to take initiative, take responsibility, and make it happen.
But I had great training, from day one, not only from the brokers that I worked with when I started in the 80s, but also with colleagues, that taught me, my mentors, and, that I always, I still talk about when I saw Annie Constantinesco. And God, her name was everywhere when I got in the business. And I remember we still talk about it when she walked through the door of one of my first open houses. And I said, I just want to be like you when I grow up. I said, I just admired her so much, her knowledge, her honesty. She was so amazing. And she is amazing. But it was learning from the best. And what they taught me was that you just don't, first of all, it's way more litigious now than it ever was when I started. But even so, you have to really be careful about what you say. So for instance, even now, agents, they go, oh yeah, you could put a pool there. Look at all the room there is. I'm like, what? You just said that? And it's like, yeah, look, there's a whole open, look in the backyard. I'm like, how do you know you can put a pool there? It looks like you might be able to put a pool there, but you can't just say that. Mm-hmm. And so many agents do that in different, and it's like, no, you have to check. You don't know what the soils are, and you don't even know about the survey. What if the land doesn't? There are so many, but I was taught really well to be so thorough. Going back to what you said, to whether it be going down to the city, you have to cross your T's and dot your I's in every transaction. And
you say you were taught well, and I know you were. And what I'm going to say is you were an amazing student because, and I'll just go down one little bunny trail of Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. They talk about 10,000 hours, is what you need to master something. And there's a piece of the literature that Malcolm Gladwell skipped over, which was very important. And that was purposeful hours. Mm-hmm. So you can have somebody that has 10,000 hours. You can have a realtor that has 10,000 hours that did not learn in the same way that somebody else like Rory would learn in 2,000 hours because she's paying attention. I want to learn. Oh, I already know a bunch of stuff. I still want to learn more. And so really, yes, you had great mentors and you're a great student because you're saying, hey, this realtor is so great. I want to learn about her. The number of top producers that we know, listen, I said I would have Rory represent me in a real estate transaction. The number of massive producers that I'd be like, oh, absolutely not.
And by the way, there were plenty of people that had that same exposure to that training and didn't take from it what you took from it, to Paul's point. So you've got to be a great student who's curious and willing to take what they learn and put it into action, and then also willing to get feedback, because those are all critical pieces.
And I'm not willing to just do anything halfway. If I'm going to really want to do something, I have to go full force. I don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master at none. If anything I do, I'm going to put 100% into it, or I just,
And I'm going to come back to, I can't help myself, being a former collegiate athlete myself. Just, I think so much of that probably comes from you being, a world-class athlete. Yeah. The discipline, the consistency, the focus, these things matter a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a portion of your business for years that came through business managers. Mm-hmm. How did you develop those relationships, and how did you maintain them over time?
I developed them through the actors that I worked with. Mm-hmm. So, because when you were working with them, obviously they all had business managers. So, and then, if you do a really good job, they're going to be impressed with you and they're going to want to use you again and again. Mm-hmm. So I had this group of business managers that were constantly using me. And then over the years, you just keep speaking with them, the dialogue. I'm always sending cards. I'm calling. I'm just keeping in touch. And just recently, there was one that I hadn't spoken to in a while, just because our paths, whatever. And he just called me again with the client. And, so it was basically, I'd have to say, through the actors that I met them.
And I'll say this to you, just as a North Star for advice. One of my closest friends, best friend in law school is an A-list entertainment lawyer, and his list of clients are amazing. And I did a deal for him and his firm, and I treated him like my best friend in the deal. And this is years ago when I was really focused mostly on managing the firm. And afterwards, he was like, wow, and then he went to send me a client. And it doesn't matter the money amount. It wasn't a massive, it was a deal we would take in a minute. It wasn't the biggest, it wasn't the smallest. And he said to me, I want to send you so-and-so who was new burgeoning actress. She's moving from New York to LA. I'd like to hand you this referral, but I got to ask you, are you going to do the deal yourself? And I just told him the truth. I said, no, I'm going to find somebody, who's really good. And he said, okay, no, thank you. Because if one of his clients, this business manager, if one of the business managers clients has a realtor, okay, and they use their realtor, and maybe it's a wonky deal, and it's no fault of the realtors, but the client gets mad at the realtor. It doesn't bother the business manager because the business manager didn't refer. As soon as the business manager refers Rory or the entertainment lawyer refers me, it now becomes his problem.
Right.
And so my North Star for that is if someone refers me someone that I have an end goal in mind, and that is that they are going to, without me telling them, they are going to call back, because that's how I got that referral was through my entertainment lawyer friend, and it's a big deal. And my goal, without telling him or telling them, is that they call him and say, you know what? I would never use anybody else ever again. And I'm sure they'll do that if they haven't already done it, based on the amount of care that we've given. And this is a particularly complicated deal, to the point where I think, like, I'm not sure how someone else could do it, and we do it. We're doing, she knows the area like the back of her hand. I'm a lawyer. Like, you need a lawyer on this thing. It's like, so that's
just to comment on that, because I can't help myself. The chain is as strong as its weakest link.
Yes.
And quite frankly, that happens to me all the time. And I don't do the deal almost invariably, but I am super conscientious about making sure that who I do have the deal be done on behalf of my friend / client, on behalf of their client, perhaps, that it's someone I'm going to follow up. I'm going to follow through. I'm going to make sure it's the best. So it can all be, it's all the power of referrals and understanding the power of credibility. So yes, when you refer someone, that's a reflection of you, but it can be done very effectively, assuming you're referring it to someone that you really believe in and they understand how important it is.
And the way that I make sure that happens is honestly to go the extra mile. And the thing is, like, this deal's a lot of work anyway. There's a lot of work in this deal, and to be, 80% or 90% on a deal like this requires a lot of work. And to be, instead of 90, to be 95%, where they give you credit for 100, right? Because you don't do everything perfectly. But if you're that close, they're loving it. It is just the extra mile, and doing that extra thing, and doing the extra thing and letting them know that you did the extra thing.
And I don't know, but there are a lot of business managers out there, and yet there are some that I have chosen not to work with. And some of the agents have said to me, you're so stupid. You're so stupid. Like, why wouldn't you? And I said, because I'm very principled. And we're talking about money. When I started, and even now, the group of real mensches that I work with would never ask for any of my commission. And even if I were to offer, they would be like, are you kidding me? Well, first of all, it's illegal. You're not supposed to do that anyway, right? But when they would ask me for a huge amount, I always turned them down. And other agents would be like, you could be working, do you know how many clients he has? I'm like, but it's wrong. It's wrong. But maybe I might consider it if they tell their clients what they're doing. But as soon as I ask them that, I could never tell them, well, then you're not doing something that's right. If you're getting paid from them and you're getting paid from me. So I think over the years, I might have lost a lot of business and maybe I could have been a lot richer. But that's one thing. I am very principled about things like that.
Yep. Standards.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
What do you do? Because I know this happens to a lot of great realtors that really do a great job for their clients and also don't carry, 10, 12, 15 clients at a time like some of the top agents. And yet you go to a listing appointment and they're going to use, somebody who we all know. There's probably 5 or 6 or 7 of them that, they sign up the client. And if it's a $10 million sale or a $20 million sale, they'll never see that agent again. They'll get signed up for the listing and then it's off to the next. And yet, sometimes the clients will really think, I need that realtor who has a television show or whatever it is. How do you deal with that in a client meeting? You're going to go for a listing and they're interviewing 2 others and the other 2 have television shows, or one has a television show, the other has a team of 20, and at a $10 million price point, they're never going to see that agent again.
Well, I tell them that, and if they want to hear it, they want to hear it. I'll say, look, you're never going to see this person. They're going to hand it off to somebody else who might just be a newbie and doesn't know what the heck they're doing. And if that's okay with you, fine. But you're going to entrust your home to this person that you don't even know, because you're really hiring this person, but you're not getting who you're hiring. And if you're comfortable with that, I can't fight that. What am I going to say? But all I'm going to say is I'll get it the second time around. Doesn't work out, I'm here for you. But do you know how many times I have gotten it the second time around? Because, as a matter of fact, one big deal that I had with Gary, as a matter of fact, in the office, was because these 2 very big, who had TV shows, blah, 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 were they're never there to service the client. So they lost the listing and I got the listing.
Yeah.
So
that's perfect.
Yep. And so to that point, when you're at a listing appointment, like what are the couple things that you highlight when they ask you, assuming in some form, what distinguishes Rory? Why should I work with you versus someone else?
Because I'm there for you. I always say that. I hold your hand through every step of the process. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be showing your house. Obviously, I will show it as much as I can if I could show it all the time. But obviously, if it's a last minute and I have a conflict, you have a choice. I can change it to a different time, or you can get my assistant. But if you don't want that, that's fine. We'll just make it a different time. But you will always get me. None of this where you have to go through my assistant to get me or something. Here's my cell phone. Here's my home phone. You can get me at any point. And I'm there to answer all the questions, because people nowadays, like you say, they have these big teams, they have this, they have that, and they're not, even if they don't, they're just too distracted. So I think they have, and also how many agents are left without retiring are in the business for about 40 years. So they have my knowledge and experience. And if they don't want that, and that, again, I'm not going to compete with somebody that just got their license, doesn't know what they're doing. If that's who they want, that's who they want. But then we're not a match.
Yep. So the willingness to walk away, I think, is also part of it. Is that?
And what about, John Smith, this huge realtor, we really like your Rory. We appreciate your knowledge. And we might not get John all the time, but his Rolodex is filled with really high net worth people. And we think that he'll have a better shot at getting us that big price on the house. How do you deal with that?
Well, I have a big Rolodex too. It just depends on who's in his Rolodex, who's in my Rolodex. And it doesn't mean his Rolodex is definitely going to buy that house. How many listings are you going to have? Is that going to match that Rolodex? I mean, you're not going to have all of, all of the properties that might be right for these people.
I'll give you one stat, which, somebody should fact check me on it, because I did the math a little while ago, and I did it for a particular area, but 0.5%. I was looking for a client for something. I said, what percentage of the home, they want to be in this certain area. What percentage of the homes are on the market right now? And the answer at that moment was 0.5% of 1% of the total inventory. And so that just goes to show you when people are looking and they're looking for their forever home and they want to be in a certain area, they're like, what's on the market right now is almost a coincidence. And in that same sense, the number of buyers for a particular house, and I don't care if it's a $60 million house, which is going to narrow the number of buyers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The number of buyers that are out there versus the number of buyers that are in anybody's Rolodex. In the Rolodex, are they ready to buy? Do they want to buy
That's
now?
what I mean. Right.
Do they want to buy now in this
Right.
particular area? That's
Right.
a lightning strike.
Yep.
If that person's Rolodex is 5 times bigger than mine, which it probably isn't, it's an absolute lightning strike that somebody inside my Rolodex is going to want to buy that particular home. So I think that's really just a myth.
Oh, well, and I also say, if you look how many listings they have. Yeah. And look how long they've been sitting. They have this great, magazines full of pictures like, okay, 60 million, 50 million. Look a year later, that's sold 60 million. It doesn't say sold. They're not sold. Mm-hmm. Why? Because that's a home run. Those aren't base hits. Mm-hmm. That's harder to get. The percentage is harder to get. So if you could just do base hits all the time, that's how you win the game.
Yep. It's how you get a lot more experience.
Yeah.
Yep. That serves ultimately the client most effectively.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And people think that, you're doing the same amount of work, for a bigger deal. I mean, look at the deal we're doing. If we had 5 $3 million houses to sell, we would do less work than we're doing on this one, so that's not always the case either.
Right.
So let me turn to a different, what motivates you? You've been in it now for a long time, tremendous track record of success. I know well enough to know how the enthusiasm has not waned. What continues to motivate you and inspire you?
People, getting them the home that they want to. I once had this writer who said to me, after I sold her the home, that I have been more creative in this home than I'd ever been, before. And I got to thank you for that. And when you can make that much of a difference in somebody's life, even if it's one little thing like that writer saying to me that you created so many wonderful stories from being in that home, and I thank you, to me, that just means everything. And that doesn't end. That's infinite. So in all these years, it just keeps going on. And I do have these clients. I have a friend of mine who I sold a wonderful mid-century to in the Hollywood Hills recently. And she calls me up and said, do you know how happy I am here? And I'm just like, that fills me up because I love to give rather than receive.
Yep.
So it completes me.
That's awesome. It is amazing how, certain agents and quite frankly in the minority, because we know a lot of them really have that level of gratitude for the opportunity they have to make such an impact on people's lives. Mm-hmm. You started early on just saying how much time we spend in a home and how, and the level of diligence we typically do to find it. It's amazing the impact, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the hours someone spends in their home and that kind of influence and knowing that you're the one who's the guidepost to making that decision is amazing. Mm-hmm. And some people really understand that and embrace it and don't take it for granted, and others not as much.
And it's the challenge too, because look, sometimes it's not always pleasant and sometimes it's fierce. You're dealing with just everything. You're dealing with business managers and lawyers and this and that and other agents and people can get really nasty. And the more money you're spending, people could just get out of control, which is where my swimming comes in. Because when I do an amazing open water swim, you're dealing with the currents, you're dealing with the temperature, you're dealing with sharks, which I've seen. And then you get out of the water after your 2 miles and you feel like you've just conquered Mount Everest. And then I go, if I can deal with this, I can deal with that. Are you kidding me? Land sharks are much worse than those sharks in there. But it gives me the confidence that I can handle anything. And so the challenge to me is part of it also. When I overcome my fears and the open water swimming, when I overcome these meetings that I have, and sometimes it's fierce and sometimes the deal is difficult, it makes it all sweeter at the end.
Yeah, the grit, the resilience, all and the confidence that you can adapt and evolve under challenging circumstances.
And you really do learn that through a physical practice. The three of us all have a very strong physical practice that, for me, takes me to the edge, beyond, over the edge, and then when you get out of that environment, I'm amazed at how centered I can stay when you get in there.
It gives you perspective. It shows you what you're capable of. I mean, and that's what instills confidence, right?
And also too, I think when we do get people that are newer to the business, watching the podcast for sure. And, just, we have a young woman on our team who kills it, but she kills it because of just grit and, going after it and going after it and going after it. And I still need to grab her a few more times and say, hey, because she will tell you, oh, and I don't know how to do this and I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, stop. First of all, she's saying things that she actually does know how to do, and she's still saying she doesn't know how to do it. And then, and then even I'm like, and that's just back to stick with what you know. Everything else you can find out or figure out. Stay in your lane, and your area of expertise. I know it. I know it when I see it. When something's great, I don't have the foresight to look at a place that's like a dump and you go, or you look at a place that's a little off. You go, well, actually, if you move that one wall, then, this whole thing would change. And I wish I had that. I just don't have it. I'm not going to get it probably, and so, I know that's not my thing.
But what you said, staying in your lane, is such an excellent thing because my swim coach told me you always stay in your lane and you pay attention to what you're doing, because if you pay attention to what everybody else is doing, you're so distracted, you're going to lose. And look, with all of us, we're all going to have our ups and downs in real estate, right? And at times when you have nothing, you'll see somebody else in the office, oh my God, they're selling everything. And it's like, you could get yourself really down about that. But that's looking in the other lane. So if there's a swimmer that I've always been faster than, and all of a sudden this day if I'm like, I'm going to lose. There's no way. I'm not going to be able to swim my own race. So I just pay attention to what I'm doing, and all the noise I filter out. So look, I could be really busy and somebody else is slow. Don't be the green-eyed monster. Don't be jealous. Don't be that. Just do your own thing and it's going to happen. It's like what you said, you swim and you just stay in your own lane. And
another way of saying is run your own race.
Yes.
And don't focus on what everyone else is doing. I always say, look at what they're doing and apply what they're doing to inform you on how you can become better at running your own race, right? Because everyone's at a different stage in their career. They have different things happening that you're either aware of or most likely not aware of. Right. And you're only seeing what's going on the surface. You're not seeing the full picture.
Exactly.
So I think that's spot on. And I'll also say this, coming back to what we were saying, when you're used to overcoming challenges, it allows you to have that grace under pressure, and that's what your clients are looking for. Because when you're frantic and you're allowing emotions to get the best of you in challenging situations, your clients are they're going to be like, they're looking for your lead. And when you're calm, cool, and collected, and you're looking for the solution and you're not getting overwhelmed by the challenges, that's going to instill confidence in them.
And sometimes, I don't know what your challenges growing up and yours and whatever, but mine with scoliosis and being so bullied and having to wear a brace and a cast for years, I could have been, and I just wrote a book about it. You could be the victim and you can let it ruin your life, or you can overcome it, find your inner strength and just kill it, And for me, when times get tough, I think I survived that. I survived all of that. Aside from the swimming, I survived just growing up in school with everybody making fun of me and all of that. And I'm resilient. And so when things get tough, I go, if I did that, I certainly can do that. Really?
I
really,
love
Rory?
You're only a victim if you choose to be.
Yeah.
And life isn't fair. And what are you going to do about it?
Right.
That's one of the Josh-isms.
Yeah, it is. And I'm trying to get my son to learn that. I'm still working hard at it because he tends to be a victim way too often. I'm like, Max, what are you going to do? I mean, I said it this morning. What are you going to do about it, Max? You know?
Right.
And then again, you know, our it's a Joshism to say life isn't fair. What are you going to do about it? Which is absolutely true. And also it's looking in the other lane too. You can always find like what somebody else has that you don't have. And that's why they're successful. And trust me, they don't have something that you have. And
right.
You know, you can make it happen. And then, you know, our coach will say, there are no victims. There are only volunteers. And that's harsh.
That's good. Yeah.
It's harsh when you look at like, okay, so for example, did Rory volunteer for scoliosis? Really? But you just take it a little step further and you're far enough away from it right now that, you know, if you discovered you had scoliosis and, you know, 2 days later, I say, well, there are no victims. There are only volunteers. You'd be like, did I volunteer for this? But the next 10 years, you know, what are you doing? Are you being a victim of it? You know, or are you doing something about it? Because if you're continuing to be a victim of it, then you really are being a volunteer, even though, of course, scoliosis or some of these bad things that happen to people, you know, I was in a car accident or, you know, someone important, you know, died in my, you know, all these bad things can happen. And then what are you going to do about it?
And then as we're just learning, I mean, there's a silver lining almost invariably in anything if you choose to find it, right? And that's where it's made you who you are.
Choice. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But you did something about it, right? You didn't allow it to define you. You allowed it to propel you.
Right.
And
to help others.
And there's this thing, you know, there's this question, again, another mentor gave to me, and it's such a universal question. And whenever something bad happens, to ask the question. Now, when the bad thing happens, you ask the question immediately, you're not going to have an answer, and it's okay. But you have to have the question. And the question is, what about this will serve me? And so now some terrible thing happens to you. You're like, well, what about this will serve me? You're like, absolutely nothing. I can't think of anything. Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Keep asking the question, you know, and eventually you get to an answer. And so, and you know, that's what gets you out of the story or the gripe. You know, everyone has their setbacks. And what about this will serve me? How can I make this bad event serve me? You know, you never, it's just the examples are so extreme. You know, I had a friend, two friends, they were relatives, and one friend, their brother was, you know, an alcoholic, and he was doing roofing work, and he fell off the roof and, you know, broke his spine, was in a wheelchair, ended up committing suicide. I have a friend who's a chiropractor whose nephew, handsome, you know, amazing, was on his way to being a pro surfer, hits the wrong wave, hits the wrong thing, becomes paralyzed, and is, you know, from the neck down paralyzed. And he has a foundation, and he got married, and it's like the things that he did after, you know, like, listen to me. I don't want that. I don't wish that challenge on myself, to see if I have the grit and perseverance and, you know, and fortitude to move through that. I don't want that challenge. And I look at even the most extreme challenges, and there's still two routes that you can take.
Yep.
Well, there's also, you know, it's like with agents, and I understand financial problems and, you know, going in and out of the business and riding the roller coaster. But when I look around and I see the agents like myself that have been around for so long, it's because they had the grit, they had the resilience, and they were able to ride the market up and down. Whereas you see a lot of people come in and out of the market just like this because they went in for the money. Oh, it's going to be great. And then all of a sudden you have it turns around, and the market, because of course that's what it does. It goes up and down, and they're out. They're out because they thought it would always be fabulous. You have to know how. And if you have that grit and the resilience you're talking about, and you have that positivity, you're going to be around for a long time.
Yep. So let me ask you one other big question here. Like, having 40 years of experience, let's gain some wisdom from that. What's different and what's the same? I know that's if you reflect back in your early career, like, big picture, what's different and what's the same?
You worked harder. It was more personal. because what's different then is you had no cell phones, you had no faxes, you had no computers. The whole world was so you
Sure.
didn't have that access. So you were seeing them, driving to them house, you were calling them, you were just like, it was just a closer relationship. Like now, like everybody would drive with you in the car. Nobody drives with you in your car. They're always like, meeting you here, meeting you there, and texting, not calling. And so that to me is a huge difference in the business. I just think the relationships changed that way more so.
And yet it's still a human business. And so
it's a human business, but yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. And then it's a human business. And so therefore, if you can be aware of that and make sure that you're injecting the human side of it, it's one of the reasons why, instead of texting a client, I'll pick up the phone and call.
I always do. I always do. And I tell my assistants, pick up the phone. They go, I didn't get them. I texted them. I said, did you think about calling? What about if their phone is in another room, right? They'll hear it ring, but if it's on a text, they're not going to, like, what? Like, how do you not that's my first go-to is to call, unless somebody really is insistent, please text me first. Okay, fine. But that's rare. But no, I mean, it is the human. And going back to that, that's why I tell them, I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to do this because I do it the old fashioned way. I'm not just going to be this, that's why we're here. That's why we want to stay around as agents. We don't want robots, replacing us.
So maybe that's the point of distinguish yourself to keep that old fashioned connectivity that much more because so many people don't.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you know what? Also, people always have done, the majority always have done a lousy job staying in touch with their clients. I can prove it because I've got the NAR stats, and I'll rough them out again. Somebody in the comments will give me the real stats, but year after year after year, NAR will do these surveys. National Association of Realtors will do these surveys and they'll ask a bunch of questions about a transaction, but then they ask a bottom line question. And that is, would you use the same realtor again? And overwhelming majority, it's in the mid to high 80s every single year that they say, yes, I would use the same realtor. And then they go back and they figure out whether people use the same realtor. And it's always in the mid teens. So it's like 15, 14, 17%. And the loss there is the communication. So now that we have,
that's true.
Now that we have these tools that can help us, I'm in favor of using the tools. And that's, to reminder to call and reminder to do this and some automation and some automated text or some automated emails and some of this and some of that. And then also, in addition to that, always having the personal touch too, to call. And you know what? It's amazing. You get credit for it. I call a friend or a client on their birthday. It goes to voicemail. I sing them happy birthday on their voicemail. I have a terrible voice.
So do
I have a terrible voice.
No, I have a good voice, but I do sing.
Right. I'll bet you do have a good voice. So maybe I'll know not to pick up. By the way, may the 4th be with you. I'll leave that in there. Rory and I have the same birthday, which I've always loved. And I don't usually forget to call you and wish you a happy birthday when it's my birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just these personal touches, are real distinguishing factors. I just want to ask you at least one more question, and then we'll go to the fire round. And maybe it's 2 questions, maybe it's 1 question, but the question is, what advice right now would you give to the Rory who just started the business, or maybe the same question, what advice would you give to somebody just getting into the business? Is it the same question? It might be, it might not be.
I think it's kind of the same question. Just to stick with it, it takes time. Anything that you want to be good with takes time. And people are very impatient nowadays. That's our society. It's instant gratification. But you can't just sit down at the piano and play. You have to learn how to play. You have to learn the notes. You have to, So I think that is number 1. And just that to ask questions when you don't know. Because when you take your test, it's kind of like the SATs. Does that really prepare you for life? No. You'll never use half of the things on the SATs. Sorry, but calculus, I've never used in the supermarket. So, but you know, it's
100% true.
right? So
Yeah.
you take the test and you don't know what you're doing because it doesn't apply to everyday life. So you just have to go out there and you have to shadow people. And that's what I did. So you shadow people, you go out to open houses and you learn as much as you can on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And then doing a deal with somebody, you don't have to be greedy. Just say, can I have a percentage or blah, 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 or the other way around rather. I have a new client. I'll give you this, but help me. And then you learn. That's how you learn, with people that have done it before, can teach you on the job training, because you're not going to know, and don't pretend to know. So that's what I think that's really, really important. And it'll come. You know, you have a couple of deals under your belt and then you're going to, but you're always going to ask questions like I still do today. But,
And one of the things that I always say, it's so true. And that is, we really, as human beings, we grossly, gravely overestimate what we can accomplish in the short term.
yeah.
And then the flip side is we really underestimate what we can accomplish in the long term. The amount that you can do by the amount that you could accomplish. So I'm new in real estate. I'm looking for clients. I'm going to lead generate 6 hours a day. Probably not sustainable. See what happens. Probably not going to, then after lead generating 6 hours a day, for how many days are you going to finally quit? But now move down the line and now you have a good realtor that's been in the business for 4 or 5 years. And how many hours a day do they spend lead generating? The answer is like, a half an hour, or whatever. So if you had that discipline and you just did 2 hours of lead gen every single day throughout a career, you would have, as long as you're a great realtor, you would have unlimited business, in my opinion.
And my version of saying that is play the long game with urgency and consistency. Because greatness doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual. And then all of a sudden, when you've planted the seeds.
Right. And focus on the successes, even if it's little ones each day. Don't focus on the negative. Don't look back, because you can't change that. And you learn from your mistakes. So just think about what you've accomplished, not what you haven't accomplished. So you look back and you say, oh, I didn't do this, or I didn't do this, or I could have done this. But what did you do right? What were the great things that you do? And I'm sure that list is going to come up way bigger, and that will propel you to have that positive attitude. But always look to that. What have you done that's so great?
That's great.
I love it.
Fire?
Okay. So one of the things we do is fire round, and we're just going to ask you, we're going to ask you these great questions, and, each one could be a long back and forth, but we are going to withhold comment, and we're just going to let you have at them, and interested to hear your answers. What's your idea of perfect happiness?
Oh, being with my dogs. I love my dogs. It's just being with animals. When I have a friend who has a home with pigs and dogs and horses and everything, and that's my day of, like, some people go to a spa day. I just want to be around the love of animals. I just love it.
What's your greatest accomplishment?
When overcoming my scoliosis, like I said, just being resilient. I've had a lot of hits over the years from that and just other, but I just feel like my greatest accomplishment is being successful, getting through it, and having a positive attitude. That I'm a survivor.
What's your greatest fear?
Heights. No, I don't want to ever skydive. That would be my biggest fear. Yeah. And you're supposed to overcome your fears. I think that's one I'm going to leave out.
What's the attribute you most admire in others?
The attribute, honesty.
What's the attribute you most admire in yourself?
Honesty.
If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
My height. I always wanted to be 6 feet tall, but that never happened.
Me too.
And that's never going to That ship has sailed.
What's your favorite childhood memory?
Lily. So Lily was our housekeeper and cook and just everything. And Lily and my grandmother. And there was something about them when they would pick me up and envelop me. It was the safest, warmest place to be because they were both very big women, And so Lily would just do this and, and they were I think that's a great childhood memory. I just love being, sometimes like when things also get really rough, I close my eyes and I'm in Lily or Grandma Gigi's arms.
Very cool.
What's your greatest extravagance?
Restaurants? Used to be clothes, but not anymore. Restaurants. Food.
What's a talent you'd most like to acquire?
Playing the piano. I always wanted to play the piano and I never did.
What's your most treasured possession?
I could say this ring, which was my grandfather's ring.
Wow.
And it meant so much in the family, to my mom, to my grandmother, to my sister. And it carried on and then it came to me. They're all passed right now. And this is a pretty special because my grandfather was a very special man. And everybody, I mean, I never got to meet him, but I heard that he was a hero. And so when I wear it, I feel like he's around me. So I think this possession is, and usually it's not material things. I would say, but I think this ring is very special.
Well, that's symbolism more than possession. That's beautiful. So I know you have great swims, but you go on a hike, because there are great hikes in LA. You go up a steep climb. You get a little bit of that feeling when you're done with a run. You get to the top of that climb and you look down and there are all of your family and friends and colleagues and clients in your community, and you shout one thing. What do you shout?
I did it.
I love it.
You're awesome, Rory. I love it.
Thanks.